Shalom, everyone. My name is Cody Bannert, and today I'm going to be discussing my thoughts on two pretty big bands' latest albums that released on the same day of March 10th, which are the latest records from Suicide Silence and Periphery. Just as a brief disclaimer, I will be most likely primarily discussing that Periphery album that came out this past week. My hair is not really great today, but let's get the Suicide Silence album of the way. They decided to release a brand new studio album titled Remember, You Must Die. Every single time I read that title, I can't help but think of Ganon from Zelda CDI.
You dare bring light to my lair? You must die!
This is just Zelda CDI core. Like, what is this? Suicide Silence have been one of the most influential and successful bands within the realms of deathcore. They have helped to establish and popularize the foundation of the style by blending elements of death metal and hardcore and metalcore and whatnot. While their general style maybe isn't necessarily my thing exactly, I do occasionally, every once in a while, enjoy a good amount of their songs. I mean, primarily their biggest hits, but still, there's this genuinely authentic angst and energy that very much characterizes a lot of their earliest works, including stuff from like The Cleansing. Since then, however, I do feel like there are plenty of other bands within this style that would expand on that foundation in ways that I think are far more interesting, especially recently with bands such as Shadow of Intent, Lorna Shore, Humanity's Last Breath, Grey Lotus, even though they're mostly tech death, but they have some deathcore elements, and Brand of Sacrifice, Darko US, Viscera, To the Grave, the list goes on. And so, what do Suicide Silence do to keep their sound fresh and exciting when compared to all these other cool, young, fresh, exciting bands that are taking over the scene right now? Nothing, pretty much. Now, okay, look, I am aware that Suicide Silence have been exploring some kind of controversial shifts in their sound, especially with the 2017's self-titled. I mean, I didn't really do like a straight up like deep dive into their discography or anything like that, but that is kind of common knowledge when it comes to the deathcore community. That being said, even if their older stuff can sometimes be worse, or at the very least their more experimental stuff, I don't think that justifies just how bland and plain and phoned in this album feels. I really feel like Suicide Silence are like trying really hard to recapture the magic and the angst that their earlier records have, I guess, or at the very least the types of sounds that characterize the glory days of their sound, the glory days from 2008, but still. But I don't really feel like they do much to really make that interesting now. Like, it's everything feels to me like some sort of blatant like a nostalgia bait throwback album that does very little to still have competent and imaginative enough songwriting today. Let's start with the production of this thing. It simultaneously tries to sound like both raw and also really punchy and really compressed. And it ends up sounding like so messy, especially during moments with like blast beats and stuff. Like, it can be painful in the ears to listen to this thing. Now, the songwriting isn't terrible or super incompetent, I guess. Like, there are some fine grooves and riffs here and there that are okay for what they are, and sometimes the band can delve into some more memorable territory with like for example, with like the spooky, scary kind of new metal style guitar work on the chorus of Altar of Self. But moments like those don't really do much for me besides just make me feel like, okay, I guess that was kind of cool. And at worst, which I think takes up the larger portion of this album, it can get seriously boring. And Not joking, after listening to like 4 or 5 songs at a time from this album, I begin to get this like numbing sensation in my brain. I'm not making that up. That is actually a sensation in my brain that this album gives me, which is not, I'm sure was not intentional, and I'm sure is not the type of thing that I would want to experience from a deathcore album, especially from a band that is this highly respected and this highly successful. Now, the closing track, I guess, pretty decent, as for at least for me, at least. It's a longer number, and there's some more, I guess, kind of interesting ideas that they throw in there. Still nothing terribly exciting or adventurous, but it's something. And even that song ends with this really cheesy, almost spoken word section, like "Remember, you must die," and it like tries to bring the album full circle with its equally cringy intro, and it's just really, really bad. Yeah, I have really struggling to find enough things to say about this album. This is some of the most unremarkable deathcore I have heard in a long time, actually. If you love this type of sound and you just miss the glory days of 2008 or MySpace when it comes to deathcore, I'm pretty sure you will enjoy this a lot more than I did. But personally, I would much rather take like so much other material within this style any day of my life over this, including the latest albums from Viscera and To the Grave, which are both really sick. Moving on, let's talk about the new album from Periphery, titled Djent is Not a Genre. That's right, you heard the boys. It ain't a genre, it's a lifestyle. Periphery have been definitely one of the more interesting bands in progressive metalcore and djent, in my opinion. They have also been one of the like biggest influencers within the style. They have been recently delving into very adventurous territory, including with stuff like Juggernaut, which is a two-part concept album series, and also their latest record, Hail Stand, from back in 2019, which, first of all, opened with a 17-minute progressive epic, which is a pretty bold move for the band, along with other cool things such as industrial and symphonic music, and even like occasionally like almost like post-rock styles, which I thought was really cool. And speaking of bold, interesting moves, the band would actually leave their original label, Sumerian Records, to start their own label, Three Dot Recording, which now houses other very talented bands such as Astronoid and Boundaries. And their latest record, Djent is Not a Genre, I think very much continues on that very innovative momentum that they have been creating for themselves. Now, despite all these things that I admire about Periphery, I've personally grown out of their sound maybe to a degree, especially after discovering other bands that do very similar things to them that I just so happen to prefer, like Event Animate and Era and Tesseract, etc. As talented as they are, the main thing that does kind of make some of their material kind of hit or miss for me, which I will get to also in their when discussing their latest record, is Spencer Totella's vocals. Now, don't get me wrong, Spencer as a vocalist is highly talented. He has an incredibly vast range and also a lot of skill in his performance ability, but his very kind of over exaggerated, very flamboyant, at times very theatrical manner in his singing, combined with his very high pitched singing voice, can definitely make things kind of grating for me. It also can add a sense of personality and catchiness to the band's material as well. But there's also just at times it can just be a bit much. This is especially true whenever the band try to explore more ballad type of territory. Like some of his vocal phrasing on a song like Satellites from Hail Stand just did not do much for me at all. But regardless, his vocal talents are at the forefront on their latest record, along with the rest of the band's talents. Like, they're really at the top of their game when it comes to their creativity at this point, in my opinion. This is shown with the opening song, Wildfire, which begins with these very jagged and technical rhythms that you would expect from the band, along with this almost kind of cold, futuristic atmosphere that characterizes pretty much everything that they've ever done. But then the very kind of interesting off-kilter chord progression in the main hook teases into what is to come later, which is this very interesting jazz break with a piano and saxophone solo. Almost like the band are like basically doing an impression of what something that I would expect from White Ward or something. I know that jazz elements are kind of becoming a bit of a gimmick to a degree in like modern prog metal, for there are a lot of other bands such as, you know, Rivers of Nile and Eson that are doing very similar things. But the way it's executed on here, I still think is really fun. It just kind of comes out of nowhere, but still weirdly works. And I think it also, to a degree, kind of plays into their somewhat self-aware, ridiculous sense of humor that I think also helps to bring a lot of character and flair to their music in general. And the album continues sounding very strong for the next few tracks, such as Tropos, which begins on a very bright and bubbly note with these very fun, upbeat, poppy hooks. Admittingly, some of Spencer's melodies and phrasing can maybe be a bit much for me, if, at least if you ask me. But regardless, where I think the song really shines is the way that it develops from there. For as it goes on, it gets weirder and darker, and it is really cool in my opinion. Great. So it looks like I lost footage around the part where I talk about the song Wax Wings. I don't know how that happened, but here I am going to re-record the vast majority of my Periphery review in a different shirt now. Whoopee. Anyways, the song Wax Wings. One of my favorite songs in the album. It also seems to be quite a bit of a fan favorite amongst Periphery fans. I think for good reason. Has some of the best guitar work and vocal melodies on the record. And along with that, the finale, as well as the build up towards that finale, is really euphoric and really cathartic. I love the way that the band build up towards Spencer's really high G flat note that I think is pretty awesome and pretty exciting and intense. Speaking of pretty exciting and intense, so is the track "Everything Is Fine," which takes on a kind of Dillinger Escape Plan meets Frontier style with lots of weird, crazy guitar noises combined with really brutal, djenty guitar work and some of Spencer's most vicious vocal performances, along with a few catchy hooks here and there as well. I also really like the way that the track ends on a very intense, brutal note with that very slow, crushing breakdown at the end. And then by direct contrast, right after that song, we have the track Silhouettes, which is yeah, it's just like an ambient 80s synth wavy kind of pop song, which is, you know, okay for what it is, but I think what makes it more fun is the way that it contrasts directly with the song "Everything Is Fine." Still, I don't know if I love Spencer's vocal hooks here and there, especially with the way that he says like funeral, funeral. Like in general, I don't really find that Spencer really has as much of a tasteful sense of like poppy melodies as other singers within like the prog metal genre, such as Asger from Vola or Jim from Caligula's Horse, or even like Jesse Cash from Era. But regardless, the song is still very cutesy, very bubbly, very fun, and is also a nice palate cleanser for the record. Like if I skipped the song, it definitely feels like a piece of the puzzle would be missing. That is also partially made up for how much I really like the song "Dying Star," which kind of builds on the very bright, upbeat, uplifting momentum of its predecessor. This time with more prog metal guitars, and this one definitely has somewhat of a vibe that reminds me of Devin Townsend or the aforementioned Caligula's Horse. Really good stuff. I like this song quite a bit. I'd say it's actually one of my personal favorites. Then the band decided to get back into lengthy epic territory with the last three songs, Zagreus, Dracugra, and Thanks Nuboa. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I hope I'm getting my Final Fantasy composer knowledge correct. Zagreus, for the most part, is characterized by these weird, jagged, angular, kind of atonal, Meshuggah-esque djent grooves. But the song then evolves very seamlessly and transitions towards these kind of interesting, waltzy, sappy, very melodramatic passages that make me, one second, actually make me want to like take out my phone and turn on my lighter and just wave it around to the rhythm of the song and just sway to its rhythm. It is a fun section though. I do enjoy it, and I do enjoy its contrast with the heaviness of the earlier parts of the song. Then we get to Dracu Gra, which is a 12-minute epic that utilizes a more ambitious song structure with like these lengthy ambient interludes that break up the song's flow and build towards its finale in a way that kind of reminds me of how other prog bands such as Haken or Enable of Scaris or like Opeth would also structure their long epics. It's kind of Periphery's execution of that, and I think it works pretty well on this song. I also really like the finale that the song builds up to, that groove that it leads to, and especially the way that it hits. Really gets my head banging. And then last but not least, we have Thanks to Boa, which takes on a kind of similar song structure to Dracu Gra, except this time it is much more colorful, much more uplifting, much more bright. It is just a very fun, happy sounding, very poppy, progressive metalcore epic that interestingly ends on a very ambient note that feels kind of reminiscent of something that I would expect from ambient artists such as Hammock or Illuvium or Max Richter, except it's in the context of this happy, poppy metalcore song, so it's a lot less depressing than, say, like Sleep by Max Richter or Mysterium by Hammock. Ending things on a very interesting note that shows more of the genuine variety and creativity that the band are willing to explore and delve into all over this record. So yeah, overall, I do like this album quite a lot. I don't know if I love it, which is, partially thanks to its somewhat excessive length, as well as, the occasional relatively annoying phrasing or melodies from Spencer, which can kind of diminish the experience for me. But the amount of variety that this album showcases, combined with how progressive and complex and intricate and consistently engaging and fun and surprising it is, definitely makes it one of the more interesting progressive metal albums that I have heard this year, and I think will remain one of the better metalcore albums of 2023 for sure. And so, yeah, those are my thoughts on the latest records from both Periphery and Suicide Silence. And so please let me know in the comments below, what did you think of these albums? Did you enjoy them? Did you not enjoy them? And of course, please feel free to like and subscribe and comment. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.